Shooting the rapids with James Bond 007 and his most menacing enemy, the dreaded Jaws. That's a scene from Moonraker, one of 5 new movies we'll be reviewing on Sneak Previews. 2 film critics discussing the new movies in town. And across the aisle from me is Gene Siskel, film critic of the Chicago Tribune.
And across the aisle from me is Roger Ebert, the film critic of the Chicago Sun-Times. It's summertime and the movies are mostly horror pictures now. It happens every year. Young people on vacation from school, they love horror films. They're perfect excuses for making out in a drive-in. 3 of our 5 movies are horror films, including the new, more romantic version of Dracula, Nightwing, which is about an attack of vampire bats, Bloodline, a thriller about a murder among the rich. But first, Roger starts with a horror picture called Prophecy.
Yeah, except the only trouble is that Prophecy doesn't seem so much like a new summer movie as like an instant rerun of Alien, the science fiction thriller that's already the biggest hit of the summer. Now, if Prophecy took place in outer space, instead of in the forests of Maine, it'd be the same movie as Alien, basically, because both movies star a slimy, gooey monster with sharp little teeth that jumps on people when they have their backs turned. The only new angle in Prophecy is that it gets into a controversy over ecology when a doctor from the Environmental Protection Agency goes north to study some weird happenings in the woods. He gets a guided tour from the local Indians.
Why are these logs in here?
They come twice each year, then they disappear.
What is that?
Zoekertje met jou. Ik hou kwijt. En in oosten voor geen oude kwijt.
He says he will show you why he calls it the Garden of Eden. What's wrong?
These are beetle roots. They should be underground.
Here.
It's a tadpole.
I told you things grow big here.
You've seen this before? No.
No one has seen them. They're only in this pond.
What does this pond feed into?
The SP River.
That's where the paper mill is.
Aha, the old polluting paper mill trick. It turns out that mercury from the paper plant has polluted the environment and created a race of slimy, gooey monsters who look like a cross between, sort of like a grizzly bear and Godzilla. And the last half of the movie consists of a series of attacks by the monster, like this one, as the survivors barricade themselves inside a cabin. Great, huh? You know, how often have we seen that scene before? I think the last time was in Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
And remember the classic Bigfoot in which the monster looked like Godzilla wearing a dirty shag rug? Or remember the classic Food of the Gods in which pollution created a race of chickens as big as Godzilla? Prophecy is the same tired old stuff, and the addition of topical issues like Indian rights, environmental protection, that doesn't change a thing. I think it was Gertrude Stein who once said, a Godzilla is a Godzilla is a Godzilla.
Something like that. You know, the problem with this picture, it's schizoid. On one hand, it wants to be a serious picture, sort of like the China Syndrome, warning us about pollution and all that. On the other hand, it's got these sleazy monsters that you mentioned. It's a traditional horror picture. They should have gone one way or the other. Neither half that they created is particularly interesting.
Yeah, that's the shocking thing. It's a big budget, important picture, and yet the monster doesn't even have the ethical integrity of something you'd find imported from Japan. I mean, at one point, he's taller than a pine tree. He pushes aside whole forests. The next point, he's shorter than they are. He can hardly wade across the river. There's no consistency, and so you can't even believe the threat.
It's a lousy picture. On any other week, I think it would have been one of our dogs of the week.
Easily, very easily, yes.
Our next picture is the same category. Sometimes I think we know when we go to a movie that we're going to see a trashy picture, but we hope that it's good trash and that we'll have some fun. And sometimes we do. For example, I thought last year The Greek Tycoon, the Jackie Onassis story, was great trash with splendid locations and good acting. Now, the new movie Bloodline is trashy too, but that's all it is. Audrey Hepburn plays the heiress to a billion-dollar pharmaceutical company. Her father has just been murdered. She's had a threat on her life, and during her wedding reception, she sends for a Swiss detective who's been investigating her father's death.
Inspector Horning. Would you like some champagne?
No, I don't drink, thank you. Family?
Mm-hmm. According to my father, one of them is deliberately trying to ruin the company. And when my father got in his or her way, my father was murdered. And whoever it was tried to murder me too.
You said you played the tape?
Mm-hmm.
The late Mr. of Secretary, this Miss Kate Erling, she had it too?
Oh, yes, but it's not Kate. My father trusted her completely.
Could I have the tape, the original? It's evidence.
I have it upstairs.
It's gone.
The film turns out to be a simple guessing game of which one of Audrey Hepburn's relatives is trying to kill her. All of the suspects have the same motive, money. Now, to add spice to this guessing game, which gets awful dreary at times, the film throws in a few disgusting scenes of naked women being strangled. Bloodline is really sleazy. It's surprising to see Audrey Hepburn in a picture like this, which is only her second film in the 70s. With Audrey Hepburn, you might expect Bloodline to be excellent trash. All it is, though, is trashy.
I'll go even further than that, Gene. As far as I'm concerned, this is the worst major movie of 1979.
What's so bad?
I was totally appalled. It denies us even the simple pleasure of trying to figure out for ourselves who might be the person who's after her. I mean, even in an Agatha Christie thriller, you have little clues and false leads, and you can sit there and so forth. Here, the suspects simply stand around suspecting each other, and then, as you mentioned, you have that nauseating business of the strangulations every Thursday.
That's worth repeating. Out of the blue, about every 30 minutes, we see a naked woman strangled in luscious detail. This picture can only be after thugs in the audience. I mean,
who did they think they were making the picture for? I mean, Audrey Hepburn fans who come to see The Wardrobe are going to be appalled by the violence.
Yes.
No violent movie fan would ever go to a movie like this. I hope they're going to be disappointed too much Audrey Hepburn. It's a toss-up as to which audience will hate the movie more.
Yeah, that's pretty well put.
Terrible. Let's look at a better movie. I mean, let's give ourselves a break, huh? One of the most dependable brand names in the movies is James Bond, who's been the inspiration for 11 official 007 thrillers, plus countless satires and countless rip-offs. But no matter what, James Bond never seems to grow old. In fact, he never even seems to grow up. A lot of things have changed since 1962 when the first Bond thriller came out. But in the new movie, Moonraker, James is still the same old Bond. Lascivious, sophisticated, lascivious, suave, lascivious, debonair. Always involved in an incredibly unbelievable plot in which an evil madman tries to take over the world. Well, the world can always wait, though, while Bond flirts with yet another sexy secret agent.
Bollinger, if it's 69, you were expecting me. trifle overpowering your scent. Standard CIA equipment. And the CIA placed you with Drax, correct?
Very astute of you, James.
Oh, not really. I have friends in low places.
Could this possibly be the moment for us to pool our resources?
It could have its compensations.
It wouldn't be James Bond without that scene. That was Lois Childs with Roger Moore. And this, by the way, is Roger Moore's fourth film as 007. Sean Connery still holds the record. He has 6. Moonraker has all the great old Bond gimmicks. I mean, we saw our old friend there, the flame-throwing cigarette lighter. But it has something else, too, the most elaborate special effects and by far the biggest budget of any Bond picture to date. The movie ends in outer space as Childs and Bond rendezvous with an enemy space station.
What's that?
Moonraker 6, you are now in manual. Initiate docking sequence. All shuttles now docked. Execute station activation procedure.
Well, now, what can you say about Moonraker? I'm certainly not going to say it's the best of the Bonds. I think my favorites were probably From Russia with Love and Goldfinger. But I think it's one of the better pictures. And in a world of constant change, it's nice to know things always stay the same in Her Majesty's Secret Service.
What can you say about the Bonds? I'll tell you what I think. I haven't liked a Bond picture ever since Sean Connery left the series. I think Roger Moore, by comparison to Connery, who was exciting and virile, Roger Moore is a piece of wood. He's stiff. He's boring. I don't like to see him.
Listen, you won't get an argument with me. I miss Sean Connery, too. The producers miss Sean Connery. The fans miss Sean Connery. The girlfriends in the movies miss Sean Connery. But what they've done is they've replaced Sean Connery with Roger Moore plus the special effects. They spend twice as much money, and we look at all the gimmicks now in the space stations instead of...
Yeah, but see, even that boat chase that we saw, or the space station to me wasn't as good as the one in Close Encounters, wasn't as good as the one in Star Wars. The boat chase, I've seen that before in other Bond pictures. I think it's a little tired.
I don't think so. I think they put a lot of energy into this picture. It's the most expensive one they ever made. It's certainly like a toy store of gimmicks and things. It's not a thriller like the old ones.
There's something else like gimmicks in the picture that bothers me too. There are a lot of commercial plugs for products. Products are held up to the screen and the film company gets paid for this. In that scene with the man and the woman there, we saw the spray of cologne, Christian Dior cologne, the Bollinger champagne. Later in that scene, he pulls open a drawer. There's a package of Marlboro cigarettes. He crashes through a 7-Up sign, a British Airways sign. There's an ad in that boat sequence at the top of the show for Carlson Boats. I mean, what is this, a magazine or a movie?
You know, I really did begin to catch on when he went through the 7-Up sign and he landed in the Marlboro sign. You know, even I thought that...
It's cute, but there's something very bad here. Every time you see one of those commercial plugs, the movie stops. It's no longer a magic movie, no longer romantic like the old James Bond pictures. It's a commercial enterprise.
Okay, so give me a break, right? This is not Dr. No. This is not From Russia with Love.
It sure isn't.
Okay, it's a way to kill 2.5 hours maybe in the middle of the summer?
I got a better way, the next picture.
Okay, let's see this.
The most popular monster the movies have ever depicted is Dracula. There have been more pictures about Dracula than any other monster. In the latest version now, Dracula is played as a romantic figure, not as a ghoul, by Frank Langella. His Dracula on Broadway was a big hit and also a heartthrob. Langella is just as appealing now on the big screen. In the movie, at least one woman wants to have her blood sucked by Dracula as he comes creeping down the wall outside her bedroom. A terrific scene. The story, however, is fairly traditional. There is a Professor Van Helsing, played by Laurence Olivier, and he immediately suspects that Frank Langella is indeed a vampire. I think maybe the cape and his reaction to garlic give him away.
You are a most unusual creature, Count Dracula.
Yes. How is the fair patient?
Her diagnosis presents difficulties.
I feared it might, my friend.
Would you care to see what I have prescribed for her?
Anything that you prescribe for Miss Lucy has the greatest interest for her.
My prescription is a most unusual one.
You are a wise man, Professor. For one who has not lived even a single lifetime.
You flatter me,
But
Count.
not wise enough to return to Holland at once, now that you have learned what you have learned.
I prefer to remain.
In the past 500 years, Professor, those who have crossed my path have all died, and some not pleasantly. Come here.
Sacrilege!
Now, that's just the kind of pet some of you might be looking for, something unusual for the kids when they're bad. I think we see one of the weaknesses of the film there, and that is Sir Laurence Olivier. He's a tired old Professor Van Helsing. He comes across as not too much of a threat to Dracula, and thus I think the tension is really lost in the picture, which is a shame because Frank Langella is very good, managing to be romantic and threatening and world-weary at the same time. I like the movie because of Frank Langella as Dracula, but sad to say, pretty much only because of him.
I like Frank Langella just as much as you did. I like the movie a lot more than you did. I think it did a wonderful job of creating the mood and atmosphere of that time. I mean, the direction, the art direction, the music. You really felt what it was like to be that kind of a creature. The scene, for example, that we showed just a moment ago, one of the best single clips I think we've ever had on the program. It shows him creeping down the side of the castle wall, the mist, the clouds behind him. That's wonderfully evocative.
Yeah, evocative and not shocking. I mean, I think that we ought to stress that this picture is not out like a lot of the Dracula pictures of the 70s with Christopher Lee, just to surprise you when he's going to jump somebody in the neck. This picture has a moody quality to it, which I can't deny is well done. I mean, I did like the film.
I think what they're going for here, and the director, by the way, was John Badham, who made Saturday Night Fever, which is a totally different kind of movie, but in both pictures he's really in control of the look and feeling. And here what he was going for, I think, was the style of Dracula, rather than the scares and jumping out from behind gravestones and so forth.
The inside quality of Dracula, what it would be like to be 500 years old.
Yeah, it's not so, yeah, that's right. Instead of making you frightened all the time, that moment, for example, when his head appears upside down on the window, that's not scary, but it's creepy.
Yeah, threatening.
Yeah, so Dracula didn't scare me. Here's another picture that didn't scare me. It's okay Dracula didn't. It's not okay that this one didn't. You might remember, Gene, earlier on the program, we reviewed Prophecy, which is about Indians in the Northeast being threatened by terrible monsters. Well, now I got a new one for you. It's called Nightwing, and it's about Indians in the Southwest being threatened by terrible monsters. Now, this time, though, instead of looking like Godzilla, the monsters are plague-ridden vampire bats. And once again, we get the obligatory scene of the grim-faced scientist telling the local Indian leader that the worst is still to come.
What animal can turn circles in the air around a fly? Has echo-sensitivity equipment superior to a billion-dollar bomber, can see in the dark better than a cat, communicates with high-frequency sounds, converts the blood of other animals into its own blood, mates all the year round like a human, can't live in harmony with other animals, has no fear of humans, and in fact thinks of us as food, carries bubonic plague without dying of it.
Go on. I'm listening.
Yes, I hope so. Because the only animal that fits that description is the vampire bat.
There's something on the scope.
Using scientific instruments to track the bats, he and his partners prepare for the attack.
Here they come, only minutes after sunset. West-northwest, bearing directly towards us in the tight formation. Listen. Right. You hold that pole. And hit the switch the moment I say so. Keep your nerve and don't throw it too soon.
Oh, God. That sound.
Now, I've seen movies in which the monster was interesting, but the people were dumb, like Jaws 2. And I've seen movies in which the people were interesting, but the monster was dumb, like Alien. But Nightwing is bad because of a fatal combination. The people are boring, and so are the bats.
That's pretty much of an indictment of the picture. You know, there's another thing going on here. This is one of those small monster pictures. You know, it's one thing when you're frightened by an elephant or a
great white shark.
Yeah,
right?
A whale, something. This is the creepy little things with bats. There was that bee picture, the swarm.
The swarm, right.
I have a feeling that when it's that tiny, you don't really go, oh my God. You go, yeah, get off of me, you know? Now, that isn't very frightening. It's just uncomfortable, and I think that's what this picture does. It's just slimy.
Listen, speaking of little monsters, Gene, here's Spot the Wonder Dog, but don't worry, he's had his shots.
That's good.
And he's here to announce that it's time for Dog of the Week when we each announce the week's worst films.
Well, if there's a theme to my Dogs of the Week, it's the various ways film companies try to trick us with, for example, phony Bruce Lee karate movies and fraudulent discoveries of Noah's Ark. Now, my dog this week involves another trick, putting a new title on an old film. In 1974, an Italian sex comedy called Malizia was released. It wasn't very successful, but its young female star, the beautiful Laura Antonelli, has now gone on to become quite a sex symbol in such new films as The Innocent and Wife Mistress. So Malizia has been trotted out again, but retitled Malicious. Unfortunately, it's still the same old Malizia, a peekaboo sex comedy about a wealthy Italian widower who wants to marry his beautiful servant, but he has to fight one of his jealous sons for her affections. The high point in the picture, of course, comes when Laura Antonelli takes off her clothes in front of that little kid. And that lasts about 5 or 6 minutes. Unfortunately, Malizia, or Malicious, it lasts nearly 100.
Gene, you think you're unfortunate. Let me tell you about my dog this week. At least your movie had a nude scene with Laura Antonelli.
Yeah.
My dog this week only has a kissing scene with Valerie Bertinelli. It's called Chomps, which stands for Canine Home Protection System, and it's a slow-moving, badly acted imitation Disney picture in which Bertinelli, who was from TV's One Day at a Time, plays the girlfriend of a young scientist who's locked himself into the garage and invented a computerized watchdog.
Watch this.
Ryan, what are you doing?
There you are. 3 years of hard work.
You built a watchdog.
An electronic watchdog. Computerized, self-activating mobile crime deterrent. Unlike any watchdog that ever existed.
What a great dog, huh? Man's best computer. It has all sorts of built-in scientific gadgets, like, for example, it can see through solid walls and run faster than a car and push over trees. And not only can it bark, but it can also make the sounds of machine guns and train whistles. So eat your heart out, Spot. That dog's so smart, I'll bet it's even housebroken.
Made you forget his name.
Right.
Well, now, so much for the dogs. To recap our reactions to the main movies on this show, Roger and I disagree about the new James Bond picture, Moonraker. Roger thought it was representative of what the James Bond pictures are all about. That's why there's a yes next to Roger's name. He recommends you see it. But for me, the film and Roger Moore as Bond were totally dreary. So I say no to Moonraker, which is rated PG. After that, Roger and I agreed on everything. A pair of no's to the trashy Bloodline with Audrey Hepburn. Roger thinks it's the worst major film of the year. 2 more strong no's for the vampire bat film Nightwing. A pair of yeses to Frank Langella's fine performance as a romantic Dracula. And 2 no's to the laughable ecological thriller Prophecy, the only film I've ever seen ever to cross an earthworm with a bear and come up with a very silly monster.
On the basis of that set of mostly negative opinions, I think we should have invited Spot to sit in with us for the entire show.
You know, that happens a lot in the summer. There are a lot of lousy pictures in the summer.
This summer seems like it's very thick on the old dog days, though. Anyway, next on Sneak Previews, we'll have Just You and Me Kid, a comedy starring The Odd Couple of George Burns and Brooke Shields. Golden Girl with Susan Anton as an Olympic superstar. The Villain, a satire on the Old West with Kirk Douglas and Ann Margaret. And a movie that just might be the sleeper of the late summer, Breaking Away. So until then, we'll see you at the movies.
Funding for sneak previews was provided by this station and by other public television stations.